We've covered a few cheaper PCs recently on the channel, but nothing quite like this. I found this system on Amazon for $400, and it includes RTX graphics, which I think might be a little too good to be true. Let's investigate.
The new A115 air cooler from Corsair packs two AF140 Elite fans into a dual tower array with 6 beefy 6mm heat pipes for powerful heat transfer. Pre-applied XTM70 thermal paste and slim slide and lock fan mounts add to the ergonomics, while 90 nickel-plated cooling fins and an overhauled retention system ensure excellent cooling efficiency. The A115 supports the latest sockets for both Intel and AMD and ships with Corsair's 5-year warranty for peace of mind. Learn more by clicking the link below.
Now I want to kick this one off with a look at the Amazon listing. You can see the title is pretty generic, which is typical of these kind of rebranded OEM upscaled pre-builts here. This is a gaming HP RGB desktop PC, which already reveals a lot about what you're getting yourself into. Intel Quad i5 up to 3.6 gigahertz, GeForce RTX 2060 6GB GDDR6, 32 gigs of DDR4, 128 gig SSD plus 3 terabytes storage. You get Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and RGB keyboard and mouse and Windows 10 Pro all baked in. And you can see the price right below. As of time of filming, about $391. Now I know what you're thinking, and this crossed my mind as well. Okay, 400 bucks, RTX 2060, it's probably a used 2060, and they must be cutting costs somewhere else. Maybe in the power supply, maybe in the CPU. In fact, that's exactly what I think they did. Let's take a peek inside then. I do want to mention in the listing, the supposed photos of this system aren't actually of this system. You can see in this one here, it's conveniently got a shot of the interior, but this graphics card is certainly no 2060 that I'm familiar with. It's far too thin. So these look like OEM photos. They're not going to reveal much about the current state of a rig like this. Also, it looks like we've a wrap of some sort. That's actually kind of cool, because a lot of these OEM cases, these like old school HPs and Dells, they get beat up pretty bad. And yeah, so it looks like they just put a black matte wrap around the case to clean it up a bit. I mean, look, depending on who you ask, that's either cheesy or convenient. I think it's quite nice. It's just a little bit of added effort to clean up an otherwise older rig. Let's get this left side panel off. And what are we working with here? Ooh, yeah, she's old. For starters, yeah, this is pretty typical, the cheap Intel stock cooler, or what looks similar to a stock cooler. And of course, 2 sticks of DDR4. Now this actually reveals a bit about the age of the platform. Probably Skylake, if I had to guess. Pretty sure this is a Skylake sticker as well. Power supply is nothing special. It's an OEM 280 watt, 80 plus gold certified, which is nice, but I have one issue with this. So in an effort to cut costs, it looks like they've spliced an 8-pin PCIe supplemental power cable to a series of SATA power connectors, which it's not great. Sometimes the extra power pulled by a card through a rail like that can cause a power supply to shut off prematurely. Sometimes it causes the cables to overheat and you could have melting problems. I've seen really bad stuff. If you want it done correctly, this isn't technically it. So this is basically one big cost-saving measure, an attempt to keep the original power supply in here with an upgraded graphics card. Now I am curious about the brands of these storage drives. I gotta say, the combination isn't too bad, 128 gigs. My Technology Geeks? Okay, for real, if anyone knows the actual manufacturer of this, maybe it is My Technology Geeks. I've just never heard of the brand before. But if you have any insight on what this actually is, please leave that information in the comment section below. Now this 3 terabyte hard disk drive looks pretty sweet on the surface. We're gonna see though when we power the system up just how much this has been used via some software. I am curious about the RAM used in this system. It does look like we have a matching kit, which is convenient. Sorry, my son's playing Forza over there. Wait, you're in second place? Okay, you gotta step it up. Second place that's rookie numbers right there. There are no 2 words in the English language more dangerous than good job. I'm just kidding, buddy. You're doing a good job. You wanna say hi to the camera one more time? Hi. It is nice that we get 2 8-gig sticks of DDR4, 2666 megahertz a piece, and these do look to be matching, although again, I'm a bit confused by who actually manufactures this. The memory chips themselves, though, are from Micron. Now, the one thing I'm a bit concerned by is this graphics card, because it doesn't look like any model I've ever seen before, and this sticker is also slightly concerning. So the remaining questions I have for this rig, outstanding, I think can best be answered by first powering the system on and diving into some software. We'll just plug in power here at the rear, power on up front. Well, that's not good news. You can see it powers on for a split second and then powers back off again. And this has continued for several minutes now off camera. Obviously, we don't get through the post process. We can't load into the BIOS. This is not good. And at this point, I'm wondering if it has something to do with this graphics card and this little makeshift 8-pin adapter that they've got fashioned to the SATA daisy chain here. If there's a certain rail in this power supply that's having too much power pulled through it, it'll just shut off in an effort to save itself. Maybe that's what's happening here. Only one way to find out, we're gonna remove it entirely. This card, of course, will have to come out as well. If I can get it out of here. There we go. Attempt number 2. If this doesn't work, we're gonna be in for a world of hurt because this power supply is proprietary and this motherboard is proprietary. They have proprietary power connectors as well, so I can't just swap out this unit for another one and simply plug things in where you'd normally find them. Yeah, it's just gonna take a lot of finessing, and I don't really feel like doing that in a build this cheap, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Where is the power button? I keep forgetting. There it is. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. It's still doing it. All right, well, it wasn't what we thought it was. I'm not sure what else it could be other than maybe just a defective power supply. I've gone through and disconnected SATA power cables just to rule this out entirely, and we still have the same issue. Now we have to start looking at motherboard power and CPU power. It's still trying to power on currently. I'm just gonna take out the 4-pin here for the CPU. And oh wow. It actually did try to power on there. Only when it didn't get CPU power, discrete CPU power, did it decide to at least attempt powering on. That's interesting. Alrighty, maybe an issue with the socket? By the way, the 3 long beeps and 4 short beeps you were just hearing there stand for either a dead power supply or a faulty motherboard, something with power delivery and the platform, which makes sense because we literally cut power from a pretty important component. And I really did not intend for this to turn into a fix or flop episode, but this thing is definitely bricked to some capacity. We're gonna check the CPU and the socket next. Looks like the CPU in here is a Core i5-6500. Actually a bit surprised. I figured it'd be something lower like a 6400, 6400T, but the frequency here is not too bad. And speaking of not too bad, the socket also looks really good. No bent or missing pins, and while there is a bit of debris in here, there's nothing obstructing pin contact with the CPU. Now I actually have an exact match Core i5-6500 here, and we're just gonna swap this one in because this will tell us whether the CPU is the culprit or not. If we still get the same symptom with this in here, you guys know the routine by this point with fix or flop, then we can roll out the chip and focus on maybe the motherboard and the power supply. I do have a last resort way to bypass a potentially faulty power supply by just adapting a second power supply to just the 4-pin for the CPU, which I know is super cringe, but at this point I just want the system to work so I can see how it performs in games, or at the very least synthetics. Maybe we'll run 3D Mark Time Spy or something, but I just want it to turn on, so by whatever means necessary. I'm not gonna bother with a CPU cooler for now. The system won't be on long enough for that to matter. We're just looking for a change from what we saw earlier. Here goes nothing. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna power this off. The chip is getting hot, which is a good sign. It means it's receiving power. We're having a different set of beeps happen now. Sounds like 3 long beeps and then 2 short beeps, so I'll have to look that one up. It looks like, though, on the surface, this original Core i5-6500 is actually dead, and that's why the system was powering on and then immediately powering off again. And to think we were ready to write off this trusty HP power supply, don't worry, my friend, there is still life left in you yet. Now, it looks like 3 long beeps followed by 2 short beeps is a RAM-related issue. So we have dead RAM in here as well? Like, what's going on? At least this is gonna be easy to narrow down. You can just swap this kit with something that I have that is known working. It's just getting really annoying at this point. The Skylake platform relies on DDR4, so I'm going to insert a single known working stick of Corsair Vengeance LPX memory. Let's see if it works now. Dead CPU, potentially dead memory. This is getting a bit ridiculous now. I'm hoping that we don't hear any beeps at all, which would indicate a successful post, at which point we could actually do something with this system. Come on, come on. That's it. It's on. I know you guys can't see from there. The fan's still spinning. The chip is still getting hot. And we don't have any beeps. That might be it. A dead CPU and dead memory in a pre-built like this, a refurbished one at that, essentially a kind of refurbished and redecorated OEM, resold by a third party, had two very important things dead on arrival inside. That's not a good look. I've also tried this DIMM in multiple slots and it passes every time, so it doesn't look like a dead memory channel. And that likely wouldn't be the CPU's fault in this case, because I know that this CPU, it works across the board. Just curious if there was maybe a motherboard problem associated with this, but everything else looks good. So the power supply looks fine. The motherboard so far is behaving properly. It was CPU and RAM. What on earth is going on here? And one other thing I just noticed, it looks like there are two layers of thermal paste for this CPU cooler. There was the original crusty layer of thermal paste you can see is not coming up very easily. This is definitely older stuff. And then there was a fresh layer above this that was super creamy and just, you know, it looked fresh and it came up very easily. This is not good practice. If you're gonna replace thermal paste, actually replace it. Don't just plop new stuff on top of old stuff. And again, not a good look for this brand that's rebranding an OEM. I've now got all of the original components back in here with the exception of, again, the two replaced things, and we're gonna see if it works now and if it posts. I'm gonna be connecting this to my capture card for footage that you'll see in a few, hopefully, but I've got the portable monitor here now just so you can see live what I see. Off to a great start because it's not powering off now. So that's good. It looks like our little SATA power to 8-pin adapter's holding up. That there is a post, folks, and the side mission is accomplished. I did not expect things to go this way. It does look like Windows is installed, which is great. This is the original drive combination here, so 120 gig SSD and a 3 terabyte hard disk drive. It took a bit longer, obviously, to get the system up and running than I expected, so I'm probably not gonna run my entire Steam library for benchmarks in game, but I will definitely at least run it through 3D Mark Time Spy so you can see how it stacks up against other systems for this price. The other thing I'm gonna do is definitely test the write cycles of the hard disk drive. Super curious about that one. And quick side note, you can see they also wired in some RGB LED strips, which you can actually see through the front, similar to that previous pre-built that we saw. And here's what it looks like from the front. I mean, it's nothing super special, but I actually do appreciate the attempt to kind of spice this up from the original dull OEM that it once was. That said, I'm definitely not giving it a pass on all of its other major issues. Oh, and something else to note, this system also ships with a keyboard and mouse. I didn't spend any time earlier talking about them because they're lackluster. I mean, like membrane, keycaps, again, nothing worth really celebrating, although it is nice that you get something if you don't have anything to start with. The brand MTG, I have no idea what that even stands for. The mouse is like, it weighs like 5 grams and not in a good way. It's like super cheap feeling. It's made of plastic. I could probably break it right here, right now, but just, yeah, something else to point out. It's probably not gonna change your mind about this system at this point. It is what it is. By the way, the DDR4 kit I have in here now is slightly different from that single stick that you saw earlier. Still Corsair, still LPX memory, and I can also replicate the timings and frequency of this slightly inferior DDR4 here so that we have a near exact match, at least spec-wise, when we run our benchmarks. So I didn't want you to think that I was putting more RAM in here than you'll get if you happen to buy this for whatever reason. And remember again, the CPU we swapped in was an exact replacement, another Core i5-6500, just one that actually, works. Kicking things off with these storage drives, you can see this is actually a Z-Speed SSD in here. This is our boot drive, 128 gigs in total. You can see the total writes amount to just over, actually just under, I should say, 700 gigabytes, which is quite a lot. I mean, that's, roughly 6-7 times the actual capacity of this SSD. So something to note there. Of course, total reads are amounting to nearly 3 terabytes, which is also quite a bit. And you can see that it's been powered on 117 times, total power on hours, 124 hours. I mean, it's been used. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. This is an older OEM system after all, but just know that even if you see updated components in here, they are probably used at this price point. And if we swing over to the second drive, this is the 3 terabyte hard disk drive in here. Now, we're not getting smart reportings here for the total reads and writes. You can see the raw values though down here at the bottom if you are curious, switched from hexadecimal. I'm not sure how this actually relates to true byte values of written data. Maybe it's 1 for 1, maybe it's not, but this has definitely been powered on for a very, very long time. It has literally been running for over a year, 14,000 hours. It's been powered on over 1,200 times. So, I mean, regardless of how many times it's been written on, this is still just a very heavily used, clearly, hard disk drive, and one that I probably wouldn't be comfortable with putting sensitive data on long term unless you're ready for some data recovery. Now, as for GPU-Z, you can see that this is actually an RTX 2060 Super, which is a good sign. Again, I was doubting it. I won't lie. I was doubting it just from the way that the card was designed, but this does appear to be a legitimate card. I'm curious who the manufacturer is. I believe that should be listed somewhere on here. I guess sub-vendor just says NVIDIA. That's weird. Usually it would say something like MSI or Gigabyte or whoever, but it just says NVIDIA. That's all we got. It does have 8 gigs of memory. It does have the typical RTX 2060 Super bandwidth. As far as I'm aware, 256 gig bus. So all in all, looking okay. The base clock speeds and things look to be in line with what we'd expect from this caliber GPU. Let's go ahead and get drivers installed and run a synthetic benchmark. 3D Mark Time Spy is a 1440p DX12 synthetic. We like using this because you can compare your score to others, especially in similar price brackets. You can compare how your system performs against anyone else who's actually submitted a score in the Time Spy database. You can see that while our playback is, well, somewhat lackluster here, remember this is a 1440p synthetic, not a 1080p one, and that's going to be stressing our 2060 Super a bit more than I would normally like. I would say this card is definitely comfortable in 1080p unless you start using things like DLSS, where it could definitely flex its muscles a bit and work up to even 4K at times. I'll show you that in the next segment. This system scores better than 34% of all submitted results as is, with a graphics score of just over 8,500 and a CPU score of just under 3,300. The CPU synthetic side of things here is where it really slows down. 4 cores is just not enough for modern gaming. The vast majority of games are going to prefer 6 to 8 cores at a minimum, and definitely with some sort of simultaneous multi-threading on board. We don't have that here. We just have 4 physical cores, and that is it. That's how it was back in the day for the Skylake Core i5s and older generations as well, and so that's why this part of the synthetic takes so long to render, and the frame rate drops to literally just a few frames per second. Still though, I have to say, scoring better than 34% of all submitted results in 3D Mark Time Spy is pretty darn impressive for a $400-ish system. Now, as for that game I teased earlier, this is F1 23 running in, believe it or not, 4K with DLSS baked in. Now, I haven't turned up settings to any serious amount. I'm just running in the medium preset here, the Australia wet benchmark, and you can see we're averaging anywhere between 80 and 90 FPS. Again, not too shabby for a $400 system.
The system's also pretty quiet under gaming load, which I'm very impressed with, considering there are only 2 smaller diameter fans in here, apart from the ones in the graphics card. Have a listen. So, I mean, from a few feet away, it becomes a lot less noticeable, which is pretty good. And we do have the left side panel off here, but while we were showing you the benchmarks earlier, the side panel was on. So the temperatures are also quite good. I realize I should probably move the mic closer when I'm actually talking in it. Okay, back to normal stuff.
So then, what an interesting turn of events. Definitely not where I saw this video headed. I thought it would be a pretty straightforward plug and play experience, as should be the case for any pre-built, whether it be refurbished or not. In fact, the entire point of it being refurbished is that you're letting the customer know that you are restoring a system back to a working, acceptable state. Of course, though, the RAM didn't work, and neither did the CPU, which is enough for me to say that you definitely shouldn't be looking anywhere near this system. I'm going to have it linked below in case you're interested. If anyone is looking at a system like this, I do strongly advise you maybe reconsider. Look, not only because of the quality control issues, but also just from a future-proofing standpoint. Now, I made the argument in a previous video over the $300 system that you shouldn't be looking to future-proof in a budget that tight. And I do stand by that. But when you start venturing into the $400 and especially the $500 build budget territory, you start running out of excuses as to why you didn't future-proof when you could have. Certainly AM4 is on the table. You could even make the case for a higher end or at least a more modern Intel platform. You don't really have, again, much wiggle room here. And the 4 cores are definitely going to be showing their age, especially with modern games. You know, you spend $400 or $500, you might be expecting to play modern games, because certainly in a $400 to $500 console budget, you could play modern games all day. The Xbox Series X, for example, or even the Series S. You could buy a PS5, the upcoming PS5 Pro, for around $500, give or take. That's going to give you one heck of an experience for the money. But on the gaming PC side of things, you really have to work your magic to get $500 to play anything AAA in, you know, medium to high settings in a respectable resolution. $400, it's kind of in that awkward middle zone, but I still wouldn't choose this over building my own, because I do think you could just pick parts a little more strategically. So you can combine hardware that makes a little more sense than just choosing a 4-core chip like this. I mean, there are some 4-core 8-thread CPU chips, so even just with multi-threading baked in, that are very, very cheap nowadays. You could probably squeeze into a $400 budget. And that is where I would start. I might even cut back a bit on the graphics card in order to make a 4-core 8-thread CPU or even a 6-core 12-thread CPU work in a budget this tight. So just some food for thought there. I am also curious what you guys think about this one. Again, very sorry that we had to kind of alter things haphazardly. Kind of shocked that it was broken in more ways than one. So a little bit of a mini fix or flop episode baked in. But hopefully you enjoyed seeing this one being tested. Maybe you learned a thing or two about troubleshooting. And don't buy this. That's kind of the lasting thought I have with this one. No good. Again, let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you are not subscribed already, that button is totally free to click. It's down there. It's that red one. It's okay. We can wait a few seconds. Thanks, I appreciate your subscription. And consider leaving a like, checking out relevant links below. This whole ending is catastrophic. And stay tuned for the next one. My name is Greg. Thanks for learning with me.